Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, welcome to the press conference of the EU Election Observation Mission. Without further delay, let me introduce you our Chief Observer, Jean Lambert, and our Deputy Chief Observer, Marek Muraczka. Please, Jean, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here for this press conference today. And what we'll be looking at will be our interim report on the second part, as it were, of the election. As you know, we produce a final report about 2 months after the final results and the court cases are finished. So, as we're all aware that on the 31st of March, the people of Sierra Leone cast their votes to elect their future president in this, the fourth election since the end of the Civil War. People came in large numbers, showing their will to strengthen the democracy in the country and make their choice for the person to be the next president for all citizens. Time and again we've heard from people across society and across the country that what we want is peace, we want to live our lives. And it's to be hoped that this election, successfully concluded, will mark a further step forward in this country's progress. On election day, the EU Election Observation Mission had over 80 observers out in the field across the country. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our observers for their diligence and their passion for democracy. They assessed the election day as peaceful, transparent and credible. They followed the electoral process in about 390 polling stations overall, observing the opening, the voting, the closing, the counting and the form filling. The voting phase was evaluated as good or very good in 98% of stations observed. And our observers met polling agents from both parties in practically all the polling stations we visited, and genuine domestic observers were also present in the vast majority of polling stations, in particular, of course, new. Voting day was generally smooth, which contrasted with a more tense electoral campaign, during which political parties seemed at times to have lost sight of the voters and seemed more interested in attacking the National Electoral Commission, the NEC, and its credibility, and dividing the country with harsh speeches and references to tribalism. With regard to the NEC, all of the major political parties, at one point or another, alleged unspecified vote rigging in the first round without presenting genuine evidence to support their claims. Furthermore, the district election officers from 3 districts were questioned by police. 6 NEC employees were detained without charge beyond the 72 hours permitted by law. Additionally, letters which could be seen as interfering in the constitutionally protected independence of the NEC were sent by the Inspector General of Police and the Attorney General and Minister of Justice on the eve of the election. The APC began to strongly object to tallying in the 5 regional centres rather than in the 16 districts, only after the results from the first round were published. A press conference by the APC on the 17th of March, in which demands were made which would in effect have delayed the runoff election, was followed by nearly identical demands sought in a court case by an individual who's also a former APC aspirant candidate. A High Court injunction preventing the NEC from conducting preparations on an already tight timetable for the runoff election was granted just 3 days before the initial date of the election, and then lifted 2 days later, which was disruptive of the process and gave the erroneous impression that there were fundamental problems with the NEC's operations. Despite these attacks, the NEC managed to maintain its independence and performed its duties in a professional manner. A number of procedural improvements were introduced as lessons learned from the 7th of March election, and the NEC also demonstrated a willingness to accommodate, within reason, changes to the tallying arrangements proposed during the negotiations between stakeholders. We commend the Commission for all of that. And I would also like to pay tribute to the work of the leaders of the other international election observation missions for their work in trying to keep the electoral process on track on this issue. And we also want to congratulate civil society. Civil society is strong in Sierra Leone, and we applaud them the constructive role they played in reminding the political parties of their responsibilities in a democracy. Because the number of intimidatory threats towards campaigners and voters increased significantly, and there was at times an inadequate response from the security services. We want to in particular highlight two aspects in relation to civil society. Firstly, the role that faith, interfaith bodies and the Association of Journalists, amongst others, played in seeking to quell the tensions of tribalism. And secondly, the important role played by domestic election observers, as well as several situation rooms, such as the Women's Situation Room, in monitoring and supporting the election process throughout, not just election day, and seeking to reduce election-related violence. Institutions also played a role, especially at district level, in bringing parties together and were able to reduce tension through mediation at times. And it's also the case that while some party elements sought to increase tension, others showed restraint in the face of provocation and made it clear that they deplored discrimination based on regional origin. And this is to be welcomed. But of course, one cannot talk about democracy without mentioning the media, and of course it is a press conference. Our assessment was that the coverage of the election campaign at this stage was low-key, but reasonably balanced in the outlets that we monitored for this stage of the process. Although the state-owned national broadcaster provided free airtime to both parties, its TV coverage remains a bit biased in favour of the ruling party. However, our election observation does not only concern how the media covers politics and whether people are informed by them about the choices that they have. Our observation also concerns media freedom. The media has to be free to report and must not be subject to violence or intimidation for doing their job. And I refer in particular to yesterday's worrying statement from the Association of Journalists. And we also want to express our concern about the as yet unexplained communications cut on Saturday night, which hindered journalists in their work, hindered the transfer of information about the election, and hindered people in their daily lives. If it proves to be a deliberate act, that is very worrying for freedom of speech in this country. We all hope that the tally is now going smoothly and accurately, and we are observing that as the EU observation mission, and I'm sure we're not alone in observing that process. And we will comment on the tallying in our full report in a couple of months' time, as our first observation reports are only just coming in. But in the last stage of the electoral process, it's crucial that political parties and their supporters commit themselves to ensuring a peaceful outcome of the election and respecting the voters' commitment and will. The rule of law should not be politicised, and the verdict of the polls must be respected. And as a reminder, as we heard at the end of the first stage of voting, there is only one result which counts, and that's the official result, not whatever else we may be reading. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Is there any question? No questions? Then it's fine.
Thank you very much. Philippe Fileski, Agence France. I have a question about the tallying process. You mentioned you're going to talk about it in a couple of months, but I think people would like to know what's your first impression that we don't know exactly how it's going on and when it's going to be finished. So, do you have any information on the way the process is carried at this present time?
Well, given that it has only just started and we are only just getting our first reports in, I think we'd rather not comment on it at this point.